So there was a woman who was traveling on an airplane with her baby. And she was sitting there, and there was a guy sitting across the aisle from her. He was hitting the beverage cart a little hard as it went by. And about halfway through the flight, he all of a sudden looks at her and he says, "That is a really ugly baby." And she says, "Excuse me? That's an ugly baby you got there, lady." Well, that's not a very nice thing to say. "Well, I'm sorry, but you know, it's the truth. That's the ugliest baby I've ever seen in my life." Well, she's had enough of this, so she calls the flight attendant who comes in. And the woman says, "This man just insulted me. He was very rude and insulted me. I don't have to pay my good money and fly your airline to be insulted." And the flight attendant said, "You are absolutely right, ma'am. I'm very sorry about that. We have extra seats up front, so if you would like to accompany me, I would be glad to take you up to first class seating where you may find it more to your liking and a better place for you to sit. We haven't served food yet, so I will make sure you get a complimentary gourmet meal. And maybe we'll find a banana for your monkey." Traveling is an interesting thing. It's exciting, it's challenging, it's great to go someplace, but it's good to get back home as well, sleep in your own bed. Today we're going to start a new series called Who is Jesus? And it's going to go from now until Ash Wednesday, to the beginning of Lent, the season that leads up to Easter. And it's based on a book by a United Methodist bishop named Willimon. And I don't know about you, but I read a lot of William Willimon in seminary. And in this series, we're going to peel back what I would call the shiny, pristine veneer that we kind of put around Jesus. And we're going to look at who he really is. And I'm going to say now that some of it may shock you over the next few weeks. And I mentioned traveling, and how traveling is interesting and exciting and challenging, and how it's great to go somewhere, but it's great to get back home. Today we're going to focus on the fact that Jesus had no home. He had no place to hang his hat. In fact, Rich Mullins, I don't know if you're familiar with Rich Mullins, but one of my favorite Christian singers and songwriters, he wrote a song called "You Did Not Have a Home." And in it he says, "Oh, you did not have a home. There were places you visited frequently. You took off your shoes and you scratched your feet, because you knew that the whole world belonged to the meek, but you did not have a home. No, you did not have a home." And then the chorus is, "Birds have nests, foxes have dens, but the hope of the whole world rests on the shoulders of a homeless man, on the shoulders of a homeless man." Hard to fathom, isn't it? That the hope of the whole world rests on the shoulders of a homeless man. And yet, Jesus makes that clear right from the beginning of his ministry. And I want to share a bit of scripture that points to that from the book of Matthew. Hear these words. "As Jesus was walking beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon, who was also known as Peter, and his brother Andrew. They were casting their nets into the lake because they were fishermen. Jesus said to them, 'Come and follow me, and I will send you out to fish for people.' Well, at once they left their nets and followed him. And going on from there, he saw two other brothers, James the son of Zebedee and his brother John. They were in a boat with their father Zebedee, preparing their nets. And Jesus called to them, and immediately they left their boat and their father, and they followed him. Well, Jesus went throughout Galilee, teaching in the synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, healing every disease and every sickness among the people. And news of him spread all over Syria. And people brought to him all those who were ill and with various diseases, and those suffering severe pain, demon-possessed, those who were having seizures, and the paralyzed. And he healed them. Large crowds from Galilee and Decapolis and Jerusalem and Judea and the region across the Jordan followed him." There was a man, and he was furious about his Florida vacation package that had been booked for him, especially about the hotel accommodations. So he called the travel agent, and he was just madder than he could be. And when he was asked for details about why he was so upset about his hotel, he said, "I expected when you booked me a room in Orlando that I would have a room with an ocean view." And the travel agent said, "Well, sir, that's not possible. Orlando is in the middle of the state." And the man said, "Don't lie to me. I'm looking at a map. Florida's a very thin state." Did you notice the details in the scripture that I read? What was the first thing that it said? It said Jesus was walking. Jesus was walking. He wasn't sitting around somewhere waiting for people to come to him. Also notice what the disciples are doing. They're standing still. They're not moving. They're fishing. They're casting their nets. They're repairing their nets. It's a study in contrasts at that moment. And Jesus encounters them, and what does he say to them? He says, "Follow me." And it says they do. They drop everything that they have, and they go. Well, then it goes on to say Jesus continued to travel, it says, throughout Galilee and beyond. And then it ends, did you notice, with large crowds from all these places did what? They followed him. A lot of movement going on in that passage. You see, when Jesus gathered this ragtag group of Galilean misfits, what did he say to them? Did he say, well, you've all had a rough life so far. I want you to settle down here in Galilee among these good folks and buy some real estate, build a church, and enjoy yourselves? No, that's not what he said, because this is Jesus we're talking about. Not some shaved-headed, earring-wearing, rock-drumming United Methodist minister. God with us commands them to go on. He says, go on, get out of here. Make me some disciples, baptize them, and teach them everything that I have commanded. And don't limit yourselves just to Judea. Go everywhere. Go to everybody. Anybody know what Newton's first law of motion is? That an object in motion stays in motion unless acted upon by an outside force? Jesus is a living example of that. Jesus is an object in motion. He's not some stay-at-home rabbi. He is a guy on the move. Jesus is a vagabond. And according to the dictionary, a vagabond is an itinerant person, a drifter. It comes from the Latin vagabundus, which means inclined to wander. This is not a person who's a member of a nomadic group of people. This is a person following a wandering lifestyle in the midst of a stationary society. And it's characterized by almost continuous traveling. A vagabond is a wandering, lone person, often called a drifter, unable to fit into regular society, no stationary home, no permanent residence. Plato said, I am but a child wandering upon the vast shores of knowledge. We're talking about somebody with a wandering strain in their blood, with natural inquisitiveness about the world beyond their doors. So Jesus is not only charismatic, he's enigmatic, because his unexpected ministry continually raises the question, who is this Jesus guy? Who is he? Well, to get to know him, from what this passage says, to get to know him, you have to go with him. Most people in the Bible who meet Jesus meet him on the road. Think about when John the Baptist introduced Jesus to the world. He quotes the prophet Isaiah by saying, prepare the way of the Lord, make his paths straight. Every valley shall be filled, every mountain and hill made low, and all flesh shall see the salvation of God. So in the person of Jesus Christ, just as in the Exodus story, God makes a way out of slavery and into the promised land. Jesus is the way to God. And how ironic is it that while we are looking so hard for God through our intellect and our morality and our architecture and our art and our institutions, how ironic is it that in the midst of all that, in the person of Jesus Christ, God slips in among us unnoticed as a vagabond. You see, what the Bible sees as important about Jesus is not his family. It's not his youth. You really don't get anything of Jesus' youth. You get birth, you get the wise men showing up, you get one story in the middle there when he's about 12, and then suddenly he's about 30. So that's just not important to the Bible. What is important is his forward movement. Crashing like a wave on the dusty Galilean landscape, Jesus thunders along through the Gospels. God at his highest momentum. And anyone who wants to meet him and be with him and understand him in the Bible has to be willing to relocate in some form, either physically or spiritually. Because Jesus is like Bob Hope and Bing Crosby in all those on-the-road movies. Most people who meet him in the Bible meet him on the road. And if they really want to get to know him, they have to follow him, figuratively and literally. Because Jesus is God in motion, leading us away from the status quo and towards something completely new and different. New wine, new covenant, new commandments, new life. Jesus lived as a wandering person with no visible means of support, never held a job, never had a proper home. And that's just not what people expected. Most people expected God to come and save them, but few expected him to show up as a homeless man, unmarried and unemployed. But constantly in the Gospels, Jesus is crossing over lines and transgressing boundaries. In clear violation of biblical law and custom, he does things that people would never imagine, touching lepers and insane people and unclean women and corpses. His own family thought he was mad. But maybe that great theologian Roger Miller captured the essence of Jesus when he said, "I'm a man of means by no means, king of the road." A God we couldn't have possibly thought up on our own turns to us, reaches out to us, and is revealed to us as someone quite other than the God we would have if he were merely a figment of our imagination. Our God is this guy from Nazareth who lived briefly, died violently, and rose unexpectedly. This vagabond Jesus doesn't encourage people to hunker down with their own kind, but rather he sends his people forth on the most perilous of missions, making disciples. There's no way to be with Jesus, to truly love Jesus, without traveling with him. Those who know Jesus best know that while the relationship with him is sweet, it's also demanding. And it's difficult, and at times it's even a little scary. Not only was Jesus constantly on the move, but he was constantly inviting other people to join in on the journey and to follow him. Because you see, there's something about this Jesus guy that leads ordinary people to forsake everything and follow him. Looking at his life and at his legacy, it's not that surprising that many people in the world regard Jesus as well-intentioned but deluded. It's not that big of a stretch if you just read the stuff. And yet, Paul, in his letter to the Hebrews, describes this homeless, crucified vagabond as, and I quote, the reflection of God's glory, the exact imprint of God's very being. The Bible introduces us to this living, speaking, breathing, moving person, Jesus Christ. Emmanuel means God with us. I'm beginning to think that Jesus means God in motion, God on the road, constantly going somewhere, often to where he is not invited. If you want to know about Jesus, you have to be willing to go with him on the road. Amen. Would you pray with me? Gracious and loving God, keep us on the move. Draw us toward you. And when you do that, Lord, give us the courage to follow you where you go. For it is in your name that we pray. Amen.